Hello, welcome to another episode on the composition of my piano quintet. I finally did it. I found a way to record the composition process on the fly without generating a huge file. This means that I don't need to take snapshots from time to time, and more importantly, that you can witness the entire process without interruption. Plus, it's more fun to watch, don't you think? Here I'm creating a new section that will have the echoes on the strings against a derivative of the Spanish Romance on the piano, which you might remember from the second movement. My first attempt is to have fourth notes in the right hand and triplets in the left hand. I want opposite dynamics on the strings, so that they rise on two instruments more or less when they fall on the other two. Now I go back to the piano for a moment, trying to find a convincing way to develop its part, which is going to be extremely difficult, as you'll see. By the way, this time I won't play the music until I'm done, so stay with me if you want to hear how it all sounds. At this point, I've decided to try a different rhythm on the violins. I also intend to extend the part of the strings and make different attempts to find the appropriate length of the hairpins, so that the dynamics don't match between the two groups, but at the same time that they don't change on the same beat in each measure. I'll leave the strings for a moment and return to the piano, looking for ways to extend its part and find a satisfactory solution for the triplets in the left hand. I make one attempt after another, but none of them really convince me. I finally decide that the combination of fourth notes in the right hand versus triplets in the left hand doesn't work, so I use cross-staff triplets to try and create something that sounds more like the work that serves as the inspiration for this section, the Spanish Romance. My initial idea is to make only a brief allusion to the piece, so I try to end this part with a fourth note descent against triplets, but I can't come up with a convincing solution, no matter how hard I try. Now I'm trying to use triplets in both hands, but that doesn't work either, so I go back to fourth notes against triplets. One after another, all attempts to try to establish the left hand part fail. Welcome to the world of music composition, friends. If you thought it was easy, think again. For the second time, I try triplets on both hands, but I'm not convinced, so I go back to cross-staff triplets. I try the triplets on both hands for the third time. Third time's a charm, right? Well, no, I'm afraid not. Not this time, at least. I've been feeling that the descent should be delayed a measure, so I give it a try. Finally, after a night's rest, I wake up with an idea. The whole problem with this section is that the allusion to the Spanish Romance must be much longer. A brief suggestion is precisely what doesn't work. Also, I'm finally sure that the part should be written only using cross-staff triplets, including the final descent. I've been trying different solutions in my mind while doing my morning routine, so when I get to the computer, I already have an idea of how to proceed. Additionally, it's clear to me that the piano must be written first, as the strings have a secondary part. It's a slow and painstaking process, taking me over an hour, but you can see it in just a minute. By the way, I've cut out all the moments when I pause to think and improvise a solution, either in my mind or in my keyboard. You may be wondering how I decide the succession of the notes. I'm just following my inner ear. If something doesn't sound right, I change it. There are some basic principles, but I don't have time to explain them here. I have found a satisfactory solution and take some time to adjust the position of the beams. Another night passes, and I wake up with my mind already fixed on an idea. I have to change the echoes on the strings from a heartbeat pattern to just eighth notes, with a 16th note syncopation on the violins. To end this part, I rethink the string dynamics and finally get to a solution that I like. If you look closely, you'll notice that they shift one beat per measure until they start again at the same beat after some time. I also extend the repeating chords so that they get to the end of the section. Now I'm starting to work on the next section, which will be inspired by the Merry Widow Waltz. The piano will have a rhythmic ostinato, which will keep it in the background, while the strings play a canon based on the melody of the waltz. My first idea is to have two canons, one on the high strings and the other on the low strings. In this way, I hope to produce a much richer harmony. However, try as hard as I can, the harmonies are not convincing. Major and minor chords appear from time to time, and it's not that I have anything against them, it's just that none of them fit into the harmonic development of the piece so far. They sound out of context. Frustrated by my lack of progress with the strings, I return to the piano. At first, I try not to use the pedal to produce a cleaner sound, but then I realize that the pedal is needed. Next, I try subdividing the third eighth note in each left-hand triplet, but end up going back to simple triplets after a while. Then I ask myself, would a single canon work? Sure, it would be hard to avoid unisons and/or direct octaves, but does that sound bad? After all, the piano will provide the harmonic support. So I try a canon where the violins are offset by a triplet eighth note. It produces unisons as I anticipated, but the result is much better, more consistent with what I have been doing so far. I finally finished the canon and I'm satisfied with how it sounds. Now the only thing left to do is work on the piano. I want the rhythm to be uniform, so that the piano doesn't attract too much attention. However, at the same time, I don't want to fall into too fixed a pattern. Therefore, I constantly rearrange the notes of the set that I'm using, so that the result feels less predictable. The piano part is finished, and now I'm working on the dynamics of the whole section. At first, I try a continuous crescendo, but I quickly get away from that idea, and instead create a crescendo to forte that is interrupted near the end by a subito piano, from which the final crescendo emerges. After some minor improvements, here's the result of a few days of work. I hope you find it interesting. I will play these two sections plus the previous one, which I showed you last week. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. See you next week. Ciao.